Hey, what's up, everybody? We are back again, and today I once again want to talk about the little known fallen SoundCloud rapper named Kid Trunks. Now, if you watched my video a couple days ago where I talked about XXXTENTACION, you would have heard his name come up a couple different times. However, unlike Ski Mask the Slump God or Craig Zen, Kid Trunks is not one of the more popular friends of X because while Ski and Craig went on to have careers of their own and were able to build a fan base completely independent to XXXTENTACION, Kid Trunks never really managed to break out of that box. Which really isn't all that uncommon when it comes to people from members only. I'm sure absolutely nobody in the comments could name every single member without looking them up. There's plenty of rappers within that group who really were only known for, of course, being around X, and many of them never really went on to do a whole lot after the fact. And it's not like these rappers aren't worth talking about at all. I mean, people like Flyboy Tarantino and especially Tankhead66 have kind of an interesting story, but for the most part, they've always been overshadowed by XXXTentacion, which honestly isn't the worst place to be when it comes to the rap game. There's plenty of rappers who have built an entire career off of one interaction with Peep or Juice WRLD or X. If you're able to tell stories about these guys that nobody has ever heard before, people are gonna listen, but that will only take you so far. I mean, after X passed away, absolutely everybody was talking about him. He was basically the biggest rapper in the game for a couple months in 2018, and because of that, everybody around him got a lot of clout as well, probably even more than people who knew Peep. But of course, as the years went on, that clout began to dribble away. While X remained relevant in the cultural zeitgeist, many of the people who were associated with him, who weren't already big before his passing, weren't really able to maintain any form of career, and because of that, many of them started to do some pretty out-of-pocket shit, with Kid Trunks probably being the biggest of all of them. But before I get into the actual controversy, which all of you are probably already aware of if you've heard the name Kid Trunks before, I want to talk about how exactly he got to know X and what his reputation was like before everything fell apart, because most people who are aware of Kid Trunks only found out about him after everything went down, and a lot of them aren't aware of where exactly he came from. So without further ado, let's get into it. So Trunks and X would meet very early on into X's career. I think they may have even known each other before X was ever even making music, or at least before he ever was getting anywhere with his music. This was right around the time that he first started dropping music on SoundCloud, but before he got to know Ski Mask, because Ski Mask only started rapping after he met X, but X had been making music as far back as 2012. But despite him not being popular yet, X was always X. He was crazy, he was out of control, he was fighting people, and because of that, he had quite a reputation within Florida. Meanwhile, you have Kid Trunks, who wasn't very popular at all. In fact, he was getting pretty heavily bullied at the time, and because of that, he would often skip school and hang out with this older girl who would kind of protect him. It wasn't anything weird like that, they weren't hooking up, it was more so a younger brother and older sister type of relationship. I mean, it is possible that Trunks did want to hook up with her, but she definitely wasn't returning that energy. And the reason for that is because she was actually dating X at the time, and it wasn't too long before the two of them would meet face to face. Basically, Trunks was hanging out at her apartment, and then X would come in, and immediately he could feel the energy in the room shift. He would immediately feel like X was very dark and standoffish and a little bit mean and scary, but despite that, he really wanted X to like him, so he would continue to talk to him non-stop, and eventually he was able to break down X's walls, and he would become another big brother type figure to him. So when you really think about it, Kid Trunks was a day one homie to X, with him being there before anybody else. Although with it being a younger brother and older brother type of relationship, they were never really on the same level. X would do his best to look out for Trunks and stop bullies from picking on him, and Trunks would mostly look up to X, with him starting to create his own music around 2015 because, well, he wanted to be more like X. And as X began to pick up traction and form together the members only collective, Kid Trunks would come right along with them. Although many people within the group found Trunks a little bit annoying, probably due to the fact that he was quite a bit younger than everybody else and they felt like he was kind of a Klingon to X. Although most of the people who said that type of thing about Trunks were members who were already kicked out of the group or people who left on their own accord, so it's really hard to tell if they actually felt that way or were only saying that because they felt a certain type of way about Trunks being so close to X when they never were. But despite that, that wouldn't break down the relationship that the two of them had together, and once X ended up blowing up with Look at Me and going on the revenge tour, of course Kid Trunks would come along, and on said tour he would completely lose his mind, doing drugs at every single show, getting a fuck ton of face tattoos, and basically living that rapper lifestyle that every teenager in the 2010s wanted to live. He was finally there, he was at the peak. But the thing was is that he never really earned it for himself. He was more so coasting off of the success of X, which, don't get me wrong, many people on that tour were doing the very same thing, but most of those guys were already grown men. Kid Trunks was only 17 years old, and with him actually getting addicted to drugs on that tour and covering his face in a bunch of shit that he could never get removed, he basically damned himself to a life as a SoundCloud rapper. And while at the time it didn't really seem like a very big deal, I mean the trend was very hot, he was on tour with one of the biggest rappers in that scene, and if everybody else was doing it, why not do the same thing? But after the tour wrapped up, he would quickly realize that he had to build his own solo career. Sure, he had a lot of associated clout to acts and members only, but when it came to the music that he was putting out on his own, it wasn't really doing numbers. And on top of that, he didn't really make a whole lot of money off of the revenge tour because there was like 40 different people who went on that tour, so the money was probably split up a bunch of different ways, and X and Ski probably got the biggest amount of it. So with him already jumping headfirst into being a SoundCloud rapper and really having no plan to actually get famous off of it, he had to ask X if he could do him a favor, and well, X would actually oblige. Because during this period of time in 2017, his heinous allegations hadn't come out yet, and because of that, his record label, Capitol Records, felt like they had gold, and they wanted more. They wanted to sign more SoundCloud rappers because they felt like the trend was only going to get bigger and bigger. And in 2018, things would get a lot bigger, so because of that, X had all the leverage in the world to be able to pitch his friends to Capitol Records, and they would end up signing a deal with Kid Trunks. Or at least I believe it was Capitol Records. He never really said the name of which record label he actually signed to, although in the No Jumper interview he would talk about how Capitol Records was trying to scout him out, so it was probably them, but if it wasn't, sorry. But no matter what record company it was, they would immediately start to pump money into his career, with him going on to drop a music video on World Star Hip Hop in early 2018 for the track IDK, which is probably still his biggest track to date, or at least the biggest one that he released solo. He definitely has bigger songs with X and the other members of Members Only, but when it comes to music that he put out on his own, IDK was basically the peak. After that, he would then go on to put out an entire album with the label. This project was called Super Saiyan, and by looking at the cover art, you can already tell that he wasn't really deviating too far away from the members only branding, which I do understand why he decided to do that. I mean, after all, you're known for being a members only and you're putting out a solo project, so you probably want the fans to know that it's associated. However, if you're trying to break out of the box of being in the shadow of XXXTENTACION, you probably want to make sure to market your own music a little bit differently, but at the time, it seems like he was perfectly comfortable with being a sidekick or little brother to him, so it didn't really matter. However, as the year went on and the allegations would come out about X, members only would start to drift apart. They never fully confirmed that they broke up, but honestly, if X never passed away in the summer of 2018, they never would have grouped back together again. As while many of the bigger members would give different reasoning for why they no longer wanted to fuck with X, the real underlying reason for them no longer being a part of that group was because of the allegations. They felt like they had something to lose, and despite X giving many of them a career, they were not willing to destroy it to protect him. They felt like X had made his own bed, he made his own mistakes, and because of that, there was no reason to really stick their neck out and try to defend him. I mean, some members would, like Tankhead and Flyboy Tarantino, but it's mostly the members who didn't really have anything going for them. Anybody who had a record deal or any form of big money to lose by fucking with them would quietly disassociate with X, even his best friend of all time, Ski Mask. But when it comes to Kid Trunks, it's harder to tell exactly what type of relationship he had to X right around the end. He would talk about it a little bit in the No Jumper interview, saying that him and X didn't really talk too much in the last couple months of 2018, but it mostly came down to the fact that both of them were very busy. It is possible that Trunks didn't want to fuck with X because of the allegations, but he might have not really cared too much either. But either way, after X ended up passing away, you would never know if they were on bad terms or not, because Kid Trunks was basically the main one who was keeping his legacy alive. Or at least that's what you would hear if you asked Kid Trunks himself. There were plenty of rappers who were keeping his legacy alive, but Trunks was one of the main ones who really wanted to pull everybody back together in members only and try to turn it into a movement once again. Despite the fact that they had lost their fearless leader and no longer really had a direction for the group as a whole, Kid Trunks would still try to do everything that he could to keep that energy alive for his fallen brother, and the group would follow suit, with them going on to release Members Only Volume 4, which is without a doubt the most well-regarded posthumous album from X, as it actually felt like a project that he had a hand in making and felt like something that he would have put out during his life, although that's not really a very high bar to clear, as the other two posthumous albums are complete dog shit that were completely cobbled together by the label with no rhyme or reason. But despite that, Members Only Volume 4 is a project that is able to stand on its own 2 feet, and on top of that, the entire Members Only collective would come back together one final time to heavily promote it all throughout 2019, with them doing plenty of interviews where they would talk about the good old days of the 2015 Florida Underground, talking about X and what he meant to all of them, and for a very rare moment, it actually felt like the group could have a future within the world of hip-hop. I mean, maybe they would continue to make music together, put out a Members Only Volume 5, which wouldn't have any features from X, but would simply continue to carry his energy, and they could possibly even go on a tour to promote it. But honestly, you would only believe that if you had rose-tinted glasses on, because when you look at the energy that they had in these interviews, you could tell that many of them hadn't talked to each other in a very long time. People were talking over each other, you could tell that all of them had very different personalities, and while that was one of the reasons that the group got popular in the first place, that moment in time was gone. And while it was cool to see them all come back together for one more reunion project to pay respects to a fallen member, you could tell that many of these guys couldn't even stand being in a room together for very long, and they had no plans of continuing to work with the group after the entire rollout for Members Only Volume 4 was over. But Kid Trunks never really seemed to get the memo about that, as once the group began to go its separate ways once again, he would become very angry, feeling like they were abandoning the message of X and that they weren't really standing behind the person who made them famous, feeling like many of them only really did it to get a paycheck, which is definitely very possible, but at the same time, I think it mostly comes down to the fact that many of these people met when they were in their teenage years. Everybody was kind of in a similar place in life where they were doing drugs, trying to make a go at music, and not really worrying about anything else. But as the years went on, many of them grew up. They began to get more responsibilities and had people that they had to take care of, and it really comes down to the fact that not everybody stays friends forever. It doesn't mean that they're on bad terms, but people do eventually grow apart. But it seems like Kid Trunks was one person who couldn't really move on from that moment in time, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it, as he was one of the youngest from the entire group, and having some of his most formative memories take place on the Revenge Tour, he probably thought that that was never going to end. But here he was only 3 short years later, with the entire group being broken up, the SoundCloud era being at its end, and his solo career never really taking off the way that he wanted to. He still had a lot of goodwill from the XXXTENTACION fan base, but with Ski Mask being a lot bigger of a rapper and being more universally beloved, he was kind of pushed into the background, and while people still did fuck with him for his association with X, it wasn't like they were checking out any of his new music. And as the years went on, his numbers would go down and down and down, the money that he had made would start to dry up, and he found himself in a very bad position. As of course, he never was really able to kick the addiction that he had gained on the Revenge Tour, and with him being heavily hooked on drugs, running out of money, and his music not really going anywhere, he made a very desperate decision. With him going on to post on his Instagram story a picture of him and X, which said "Long live X" and "Long live Kid Trunks," implying that he had actually passed away. And this would immediately create a bunch of speculation from the fan base, with many people coming out to say rest in peace to Kid Trunks. It's really fucked up that he passed so young. We lost X in 2018, and now only 4 years later, we lost Kid Trunks. And all of this would give both his Instagram account and his Spotify a big boost, with people of course streaming his music more after they thought he passed away, as every single dead rapper usually becomes a lot more popular than they ever were when they were alive. But here's the thing, to be dead, you actually have to be dead, and Kid Trunks was very much alive. Trying to fake your own death was not really an easy task, and it was probably only a matter of time before somebody saw him walking around in Florida and exposed the fact that he lied about his own passing. So Trunks would make the tactical choice of telling everybody that he actually wasn't dead, but he did have cancer. Not dead, but he was dying, which was kind of the best of both worlds when it came to getting clout, because on one hand he would get a lot of sympathy, but on the other he didn't have to hide in his house and pretend that he wasn't alive anymore. However, things would get very weird very fast when he ended up making a post basically saying that he was completely cured of cancer, and then he would also promote Fashion Nova Men at the same time, which included a picture of him holding a vape, with many people saying, if you beat cancer, why would you still be vaping, or at least why would you be doing it publicly, because it's kind of a bad look. But either way, despite the fact many people found it very weird, he might have been able to get away with this entire lie if it wasn't for the fact that he would continue to add more and more onto it. I mean, you got away with it, dude. You got the money that you wanted from Fashion Nova. You should be able to move on and pretend like it never happened. But instead, he would start to post a bunch of screenshots of him talking to different celebrities. You had people like Billie Eilish, Trippie Redd, Noah Cyrus, people who had never really worked or talked to Trunks in the past, apparently wishing him well on his cancer journey. Although fans would immediately find out that he was faking all of the screenshots, as many of the pictures used for them were very old photos of all of these celebrities that were very easy to find online. I mean, if you're trying to do something like this, Trunks, you probably should have at least went on VK and tried to find a rare photo of these people. You still would have got found out, but it might have taken a couple more days. So with all of this mounting pressure and people online starting to think that he was a phony, you think the best choice would have been to kind of take a step back and get off the internet for a little bit and let things cool down. But it seems like at this point he was completely addicted to all the attention he was getting, so he would once again add on to the lie by telling people that he actually got shot in the neck and was now in the hospital, with them trying to remove the bullet from his throat. With him going on to show supposed proof of him actually being shot by posting a picture on Instagram of his neck being completely cut open on the side, although most people who know anything about basically anything were able to see that that was definitely not a bullet wound. I'm obviously not going to show it here, but it's not all that hard to find online if you really want to. But basically, from the looks of it, it seemed like he got cut on the side of his neck by a piece of sharp metal. I'm no expert on guns or anything, but I think most people who get shot in the throat probably don't survive that. It's also very disrespectful because, of course, his friend X actually did pass away from the very same injury. So at this point, people were very upset, and he had no choice but to come clean. With him going on Instagram Live and apologizing to the internet by telling them that he was on drugs and that he only did this because he felt like his career was slipping away and that he had to do something drastic or he was going to go completely broke. He would also reveal that he got that neck wound because he ended up having a seizure while he was in the hospital, and he had a COVID mask on at the time, which ended up breaking open and cutting his neck. And while some people still felt kind of sympathetic to him, the average person was definitely not very happy about this, and he was basically marked forever as the rapper who faked cancer. In the following years, he did everything that he could to try to get that label off of him, apologizing time and time again and telling everybody that he was doing a lot better when it came to drugs and he was sober now. But at this point, nobody really wanted to hear it. He had already been marked as a complete piece of shit that would be willing to fake a deadly disease that takes out millions of people a year for a little bit of clout, and there's not really any coming back from that. Or is there? Because many different people online have done very similar things and still managed to have a kind of fruitful career after the fact. I mean, look at Little Tay. The very next year of 2023, she would do basically the exact same thing that Kid Trunks did by faking her death, only to then come back with a big comeback music video showing everybody that she was still alive. And well, it really worked out for her because she ended up making a bunch of money off of that. And it basically revitalized her entire career. I mean, she had been falling off for much longer than Trunks, with her not really being relevant since 2018, but her coming back 5 years later and faking her death would completely rocket her back into the spotlight. And maybe you feel like that's a different situation, as apparently it was actually her dad who faked her death, which is complete bullshit. She was only using him as a scapegoat, but I guess she had somebody to blame the entire thing on, and considering the fact that her dad doesn't really have any form of online footprint, he couldn't really defend himself. So maybe we need a more one-to-one comparison. Now, I know this is going to be kind of weird, and none of you probably ever expected that I would bring this person up in any of my videos, as he's not a rapper, but well, Both of them went on No Jumper at one point, and both of them faked cancer, so I feel like it's a fair comparison. Yeah, that's right. We're talking about Boogie2988. Now, I know many of you guys probably aren't all that interested in YouTube drama and are probably a lot more aligned with the world of hip hop, but if you were online in any capacity during the summer of 2024, you're probably at least aware of Boogie2988 and the fact that he faked cancer, and he faked it for almost 2 years, with him originally coming out and making a video talking about how he had polycythemia vera, which was a very light version of cancer, I guess, with him calling it the Animal Crossing of cancer as opposed to the Dark Souls. Kind of a weird way to talk about a deadly disease, but well, Boogie's a weird fucking guy, so I guess nobody really thought too much of it at the time. And of course, accusing somebody about lying about something that extreme is not really a good look, so nobody would really do so for the following 2 years. But then the big time screamer Destiny would catch wind of what was going on, and considering the fact that he doesn't care about his reputation and will basically say whatever he can to gain more fame, he would immediately call out Boogie for faking it. Boogie would crack under pressure, and it was revealed that he had been lying about it for the past 2 years. And immediately the entire internet would show their disgust. Boogie hadn't really been all that relevant for the past 3 years, but as soon as this went down, everybody online was talking about him. Even people who had no idea who he was in the first place would come out to say that he was a disgusting, vile piece of shit. And I mean, you can't really argue with that. Faking cancer to try to get donation money and get sympathy is one of the lowest things that a person can do. But despite that, Boogie wouldn't really get any repercussions. I mean, sure, he had to give his golden play button away, and he ended up donating a bunch of money to a cancer hospital to try to save face, but after he ended up getting a face tattoo that said liar, he was completely forgiven by all of his friends, and he would only gain more money and attention after the fact. I mean, right now, Boogie is probably making more money online than he ever has in his entire career. So why was it that Boogie and Lil Tay were able to get away with that type of action, and not only that, but actually thrive because of it, while Kid Trunks had his entire career destroyed because of it? Well, I really think it comes down to a couple different factors. First of all, the size that Kid Trunks was at when he did this wasn't as big as Boogie or Lil Tay. Lil Tay, while being a joke and meme online and never really having an actual fan base, was very popular and viral on Instagram in 2018. Boogie2988 was one of the biggest YouTubers on the entire platform for a solid 5 years, before then falling into disgrace and being completely hated by the entire internet, whereas Kid Trunks was a friend of X, not even one of the more popular friends of X, which meant that his reach wasn't very broad. If you knew about Kid Trunks, it probably meant that you were very deep in the X fan base, or that you were a fan of him back in 2018. Although I don't think anybody's favorite rapper from the SoundCloud era was Kid Trunks. He never really stood out all that much, he never really got into a bunch of drama. He did have that one viral moment where he talked about being the best Asian rapper alive, although I don't think most people even remember that nowadays. So he doesn't really have that nostalgia factor that could have helped him through this entire controversy, and on top of that, with him having no real fan base of his own, he didn't really have people to defend him when the entire internet was coming after him. On top of that, both Lil Tay and Boogie are very hated already. They already weren't very well liked on the internet as a whole, so when they did another bad action or pulled some sort of bullshit, nobody was really all that surprised. If you already think somebody's a piece of crap, you're not really going to be surprised when they pull some more bullshit. I mean, look at somebody like Tekashi 6ix9ine. There's no real way to take him down because he's already done basically everything a person can do to get in trouble online. It's always the people with the cleanest front-facing images that have the most to lose. Once you're already a little bit muddy, a couple more spots of mud isn't really going to do a whole lot to you. And while Kid Trunks kinda did have a positive reputation before this all went down. I mean, don't get me wrong, some people were talking about how he was a scammer and that he was egotistical, but in the broader fan base, nobody was really aware, or at least they didn't really care about those more minor controversies. But when he came out and faked cancer, and especially when he faked getting shot in the neck, a lot of those people who once had respect for him would completely turn their backs, because many people in the fan base never really saw Kid Trunks as his own independent artist. They saw him as kind of an extension of XXXTENTACION, somebody to carry the torch, kind of like Kid Laroi in Juice WRLD. Imagine if Kid Laroi came out and faked cancer tomorrow. I think a lot of people would be very upset. But imagine if Tekashi came out and faked cancer. I think most people would probably be celebrating, and the only reason they would be upset that he faked it is because he doesn't actually have it. That's the type of reputation reputation that Tekashi has. He's so hated that you can't really add anything onto it to make it worse. But when it comes to Trunks, with him having such a clean front-facing image, when that little bit of mud hit him, or let's be honest, an entire dump truck full of shit ended up hitting him, it would completely eviscerate his reputation, or more so, overshadow it. Because with him not being big enough or known enough online for the average person to know who he is, their first interaction with him was the cancer controversy, basically imprinting him forever as the rapper who faked cancer. I feel like this is also a very similar thing that happened to Zillakami. I know a lot of people wonder why he wasn't able to get away with his allegations, but people like Xavier Wolf and Puya were. I think it comes down to the fact that Zilla wasn't really as well known as most people think. I mean, sure, within the underground, he was very well known, especially for people who like trap metal, but overall, his fan base probably wasn't all that big in comparison to the internet as a whole. So when these allegations started to come out, while it might have been devastating for the people who were fans of him, the average person had never heard of Zillakami before, and their very first impression of him is that, well, he's a... And you're most likely not going to be able to overcome that type of reputation. I mean, after all, first impressions basically mean everything. When it comes to Tekashi 6ix9ine, who has very similar allegations, his first impression in the rap game was Gummo. They had already seen the way that he looked, they had listened to his music, some people liked it, some people hated it, but then the very next thing that they heard was, well, the allegations. But at that point, they had already built an image of who Tekashi was in their head. Whereas when it comes to Zillakami, all people know about him is that he's a child toucher. And if that's what you're known for, that's what you're known for. You can't really change your reputation online unless you really put work in and try constantly to keep building your platform. But if it's built off of an accusation like that, you're probably doomed from the very start. So with that said, it's very clear that Kid Trunks should have never done this in the first place. But I mean, that's very obvious. I don't think you really need me to tell you that. The real thing that you're probably wondering is, could Kid Trunks have actually pulled it off and managed to build an entire career off of the back of it like Little Tay? And I think the answer is maybe. Now, I think one of the reasons that Little Tay was so successful when it came to her entire comeback is, one, well, she's a young girl, so people are more likely to feel bad for her, with her talking about her father being abusive and having a bunch of health problems. Nobody's really going to want to question that, because once again, you come off as kind of a piece of shit if you try to, whereas Kid Trunks is a face-tatted, drug-addicted rapper. I mean, does anybody really expect him to not be a complete piece of shit? And that's not me saying that every SoundCloud rapper is a complete piece of garbage. I'm just saying the average person who has never interacted with somebody like Kid Trunks before is probably going to see what he looks like and go, yeah, that guy's probably a fucked up person. And it's not because people are racist or averse to that type of look. It more so comes down to the fact that people like VM and D Kane and the Island Boys have really associated that face tatted look with complete degeneracy. So anybody who has it, despite being from that era or not, is already going to kind of be looked down upon. So he didn't really have that going for him. But I think the other reason that Little Tay was actually able to get through the controversy is because she never backed down. She never apologized. She continued to post, she continued to fight with people until eventually some portion of her audience actually began to believe what she was saying. Now, these people may be very young, they may be very unintelligent, I don't really know, but either way, she had a solid chunk of people who were willing to get down with what she was saying. And I honestly believe that Kid Trunks might have been able to do the same thing if he hadn't have apologized. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing to apologize, but at the point that he was at, doing so wasn't really going to be able to save him. The hate was already growing, people were already upset, many people in members only were already cutting him off. He probably should have continued down the same path. I mean, he never should have went down that path in the first place, but if you were going to go there, then you got to stay the course. You got to see the entire thing through. You can't back down halfway in. I mean, yes, people probably would have followed you around forever talking about how they think you faked cancer, but once you confirmed it, you basically dug your own grave. And Trunks has been constantly trying to get the goodwill of the people back on his side for the following 3 years, with him talking about, once again, how he's not on drugs and he's a better person and he's actually very humble and he's changed his ways and he's not the same person that he used to be. But unfortunately, people are never going to buy that. You're forever marked as the rapper who faked cancer, the same way that Tekashi will always be marked as the rapper who snitched on his entire gang, and because of that, you have to deal with that reputation. Once you're a hated figure, you're a hated figure, and you got to play into it if you want to continue to get attention. Now, I'm not saying that Kid Trunks should do that. Maybe it's better for him to completely completely back away from the internet and try to find a more regular life. But I would say the only way that he's ever going to be able to build a fan base again is by playing into all the hatred that people have for him. Stop trying to fight with people. Stop trying to prove your innocence. Stop trying to get people back on your side. If you wanted to be sympathetic, you had the chance back in the day, as after all, he never needed to fake cancer. He never needed to fake getting shot in the neck. He was already suffering with drug addiction. He was going through seizures. He had a couple strokes. If you wanted people to feel bad for you, you should have told the truth. But you decided to make up a lie that was a lot more exaggerated and vile than it needed to be, and now you gotta live with that. Although, to be honest with you, I really don't think that Kid Trunks has it in him anymore. I mean, he's had 3 strokes at this point. I feel like he's not even the same guy that he was when he was blowing up, and while you kind of have to feel bad for him for going through that, at the same time, it's hard to because of what he did. I mean, after all, when you fake a deadly disease and then something bad actually happens to you, nobody can really have sympathy anymore. And that finally leads me to the closing question of the entire video. Should we forgive Kid Trunks? And I would say, well, I mean, probably not. I mean, what he did is really shitty, but when it comes to the internet, a lot of people do very shitty things. I don't think he's in an unwinnable position. I think he could have some form of comeback, but the path that he would have to take to get there might not be worth the effort. I mean, I would totally understand if anybody who has family members affected by cancer would not want to forgive him. I don't think that people should, but I mean, I've seen a lot of comments before of people talking about, hey, Twisted, why won't you get off of Xavier Wolf's back? I mean, sure, yeah, he hit that dog, he admitted to it, but it's been a year at this point. What is he supposed to do? Live the rest of his life in shame? I mean, we need to move on. We need to let him get past it. How is he ever going to grow to be a better person if we never are able to give him that opportunity? But if you have that energy for Xavier Wolf, you have to have the same energy for Kid Trunks. I mean, on the list of beating dogs versus faking cancer, is one worse than the other? I would say they're both on the same level. So if you have all that sympathy and you feel truly like they should be forgiven for their actions, then well, you gotta forgive both. The same goes for Zillakami, the same goes for Tekashi 69. If we're gonna forgive these awful actions, we have to forgive everybody. We can't pick and choose based off of the people that we like and the people that we don't like, but that's really what it comes down to. People already didn't really feel all that strongly towards Kid Trunks, so when he did something awful, it was very easy to ostracize him and call him out. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have, but we have to keep the same energy for people that we do like. I know it's hard when somebody that you've looked up to for years ends up doing something awful, and it completely destroys your perception of who they are as a person and what they actually meant to you. You start to question yourself. You start to feel like you actually lost a piece of who you were, and that's not a bad feeling to have. We may want to forgive and forget, but we have to admit that things will never be the same again. It's sad to say, but once the box is opened and people see what's truly in there, there's no closing it back up and pretending like it never happened. So with that said, I'm not here to answer the question of should we forgive Kid Trunks. I'm leaving it up to you. Do you believe that we should forgive Kid Trunks? Do you believe that we should forgive Xavier Wolf? If you do, I can't change your mind. Honestly, I'm not trying to change your mind. All I ask is that you stay consistent. If you truly have forgiveness in your heart for the worst actions that a person can take, if you forgive Zilla, if you forgive Xavier, if you forgive X, well, you have to forgive Kid Trunks. And with that said, I leave it up to you guys in the comments. Thank you so much for all of the crazy support on the X video. I honestly didn't read the comments, but the views went fucking crazy. The likes went fucking crazy. So shout out to you guys. Welcome to all the new people who came from that video. So glad to have you here. If you're not familiar with me, I mostly do documentaries on underground rappers, but every once in a while I do a kind of think piece like this. People seem to really like them or really hate them, but hey man, I enjoy doing them and the people who enjoy them really enjoy them. So I'm going to continue to do them. I also do all my research from Reddit. I'm an underground grifter who only got into the music in 2026, 2025, 2027. I don't really know. And yeah, that's pretty well it. But if you guys enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel, like, leave a comment, all of that shit. Let me know what you think. And if you make a good enough point, I'll pin it, I'll like it, I'll do all that. Knife gang, delete this gang. Shout out to the G59 subreddit. I see you guys sharing all of my videos. I really appreciate that. Really helping me out. And with all of that said, I will see you in the next one. Peace out. Kid Trunks. I don't know, brother. I don't know if it's forever, but it might be for right now.